Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Evolving Skies, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are looking at a defensive build of Zacian Zamazenta in the post-rotation format. We know that this shell has been a strong archetype with Luke Metal at the helm, giving us some extra bulk and also some energy discard, but the heavy lifting was normally being done by the Dauntless Shield ability of Zamazenta and Intrepid Sword, giving us consistency with the Zacian as well as some higher damage thresholds there as well. So that's what we're going to be taking on into the post-rotation format, with the concept that Zamazenta is still chonky as hell. Going to be really awkward with the new Crystal Cave Stadium. Healing 30 from all of your metal type Pokemon between turns means that all of these Pokemon that do chip damage into the Zamazenta and try and set up two shots are gonna find it a pretty difficult challenge, especially when we're switching between multiple Pokemon throughout the entire time, trying to maximize the value of the Crystal Cave. If they don't have instant boss responses, you can get double dips, triple dips on these heals and undo a whole load of damage that they've done that entire time. So Zamazenta, still a really thick boy in this format, with Cape of Toughness going on in here, and this new stadium for undoing some damage. And at the same time, Zacian is a fantastic partner here for Zamazenta because he's great at dealing with V Pokemon all in one attack with his Brave Blade and offers card draw throughout that early game. And with the amount of metal that we play in the deck, can easily attach to himself and power up multiple threats all in one go. So the list is going to be trying to make it, as many difficult prizes as possible for the opponent, very similar to how we have played Luke Metal in the past. So we are just going to play 4 copies of Zacian V, 4 copies of Zamazenta V, and 1 copy of Oranguru. We don't mind giving up a prize. It never changes that prize race, so it's a Pokemon we can always throw into the active position. I believe he's the perfect Pokemon to use as a one-off because he has great synergy with Intrepid Sword to allow us to get more energy attachments, and it helps protect around Marnie, which is very, very important for this archetype to do because we have no internal draw power, we have no tutoring, no Cinccino's, no Inteleons, no outs basically. We can only draw cards by ending our turn on Intrepid Sword. So having Primate Wisdom in play means we play around Marnie very easily, and it means we can sort of bank things like Boss's Orders, switch outs, those sorts of things to the top of our deck so that we can always be in a good position the following turn no matter what our opponent does to us. And that's super important for a deck that has no draw engine per se, or at least during the turn rather than an end of turn effect. So yeah, Guru is a really nice card to have here, but we're all in on the 2 dogs. They are the full focus and focal point of the archetype. Onto the trainers then. We are going to have a lot of switches to move in and out of Zamazentas so that we can force our opponent to use their boss's orders while we're Crystal Cave healing, as well as move in and out of things like Brave Blade. Same thing for the air balloons, but 4 Toughness Cape is going to be our main tool here. We want to buff up our Zamazentas and our Zacians. There's been times where I've flirted with the idea of Rusted Shield, but I also want my Zacians to be chunky as well. So at the moment, we're trying to have the best of both worlds with the Cape of Toughness. We'll see how the format develops. Depending on the damage breakpoints, it may be more important just to play Rusted Shields. But at the moment, we're just going for the vanilla Cape of Toughness, which can be attached to everything, which is great. Then we have the Quick Balls and the Saucers, everything that you'd expect really in this archetype. Again, it's a really similar shell to Luke Metal. Think of it as the same archetype, but we don't have that GX attack anymore. We're just trying to get the reduction of damage via things like Crystal Cave, essentially, which we have to play 4 copies of. Even if you don't think this effect is that strong, you need to play 4 copies because we need to have answers to Path to the Peak. So these are always going to be important cards to be tracking down throughout the entire game and making sure that you have plenty of them to bounce opponents' stadiums. Until you know what your opponent is playing, I think you won't be the first person to initiate the stadium war. You'll be trying to put your cave in second in most instances. Onto the supporters then. We are going to have quite a high count of supporters, again, because we don't have that sustainable draw engine to fall back on. We don't have Crobats, we don't have Eldegoss, we don't have Cinccino, Inteleon, any of those things. So it's all based on supporter draw here. So we have a high Marnie count. We have a high Birdkeeper count, again, allowing us to pivot between our 2 retreat cost Pokemon, which is super important. Obviously, we lose Pokédoll, which is a big card in Luke Metal for helping you reset things like Brave Blade. So now having combos like Switch Birdkeeper or Birdkeeper Air Balloon, these sorts of things are going to be really important to have, and it helps you grow that hand size, which is something that we do quite a lot here, because in many instances we may not need to play a traditional tempo game plan where we're just trying to set up attackers and swing into them. We can be wasting time a lot of games here where we're just bird keeping into another Zamazenta, using Crystal Cave, passing, that sort of thing, ending on Intrepid Sword, doing all of that, building up a hand size, building up a board state to where we have, multiple Zamazenta ready to go, Zacian ready to deal with their attacking V Pokemon, and really establish a board. So Birdkeeper helps us continue to grow that hand size, as well as offering great switch outs, which is fantastic here. 4 copies of Boss, again, you don't need to use them very, very proactively, but it can be great for, again, dealing with Pokemon that your opponent is powering up in the back. And you just want to have a really high count here because, again, no conventional draw options or search options for the card. And for research for deeper dives into the deck. For energy, we are playing a lot. We have committed 1 space to a capture because Zamazenta has 1 colorless in its attack cost, so I like the extra outs to Zacian. But in general, I like a thick metal energy count here, because Intrepid Sword is nutty when it's hitting targets, and I think that's super important in general. So yeah, I really like the very, very high count of basic metal energy right now. It may be a case that we work in coating metals later down the line and start to strip away this count, but that's really based on how the meta ends up developing. I initially thought that Victini was going to be a very, very good deck, and now I think the more Inteleon engines that I'm crafting in this format, the less I like Victini in general, because I just think that quick shooting being an easy way to 2-shot into a 3-prize Pokemon as a 1-prizer is like horrific for Victini. So I feel like we may be able to get away with a full basic energy count. It's one of those things where you may be forced to play coatings though, so just bear that in mind as a potential change going into the future. Here is the full list now, though. Very, very simplistic. We just have our Pokemon. We just have a ton of energy, so we can hit them every single turn with the turn attachment, as well as Intrepid Swording a bunch. And yeah, we're just trying to slow the game down with Cape of Toughness, Crystal Cave. We're trying to get those energy attachments via Saucer. And yeah, pretty much just go ahead with our boring game plan of Zacian walling people out. Zamazenta walling people out and Zacian dealing with threats, essentially. For tech options, there are a few things here. I'm a decent fan of Raihan, and I think you may consider 1 or 2 copies here because he can cherry pick pieces. Great for getting a stadium straight away. Great for getting things like a extra saucer, as well as getting that attachment from Raihan. So cherry picking some important cards can be a big deal here. As I said, Rusted Shield was a way that I initially built this approach, but I liked the chunkiness of Zacian at the same time. But depending on the damage breakpoints that people are trying to hit into Zamazenta, you may need to go for the higher hit points of the shield. Coating Metal, like I said, it's a kind of reactive to the meta style card, so we'll see how Victini fares in those opening few tournaments, and then make the decision on coating whether or not we need it. But that's quite an easy insta change in and out between our basic metals. It just means we hit them less off of Intrepid Sword, but overall it's a decent sacrifice. Then there's energy removal. We've seen a lot of Luke Metal lists of the past play Crushing Hammers, play things like Yell Grunt just to buy more turns as we're passing. And it makes a lot of sense here as well, seeing as though we're getting heal value between turns, we're getting Intrepid Sword value between turns, even if we're not attacking. Removing an energy does still grant us a lot of value, so I could foresee these cards going into the list as well, just to buy us that little bit more time. It also works very nicely with Zamazenta already removing special energies from play, combining that removal with a Yell Grunt or with a Crushing Hammerheads can really set back certain attackers, so that could also be very, very good for you. And Aegis/V could be an include if you are expecting Decidueye. Obviously, with the Resistance and the Crystal Cave and the Cape of Toughness, as an Aegis/, even though it only hits 130, should be getting through a good number of Decidueye before it goes down, and that's obviously going to grant you a lot of value. And if you can, retreat it or whatever, get it back on the bench and start Crystal Cave healing up, even if you're just passing Intrepid Swording, you can then get yourself nice and healthy again to come back into that active position. So I think all in all, Aegis Slash would be only required as a one-off tech and probably does get you over the line in that matchup. Onto the matchup overview then. I think against most of the VMAX decks, we should actually be pretty good. Even Ice Rider that would probably play Path. Obviously, we have type coverage on that. Shadow Rider also can be playing Path. But they, of course, can't use the Alcremie because it does have weakness. So they have to get very high amounts of Psych Energy in play to start getting through your Zamazenta, and they have to time that path very well. So I still think the ball's in our court to be pressurizing them with early Brave Blades and hitting with Zamazenta at the same time. We should be pretty okay there. And ultimately, you know, things like Urshifu don't have high enough damage caps to just use things like 100 Furious Blows and whatnot to really get through you. I think the healing that we have should be just too much for them for the most part. So yeah, I think really it's just looking at other two-prize V attacking decks, and I think Zacian's probably the scariest one to bear in mind. Obviously, regular Victini V as well as the VMAX are both extremely scary Pokemon. The regular V can just churn through Zamazentas in the list right now. If we do play Coating Metals, that matchup gets significantly closer though. So that could, you know, be an indicator. If you are worried about Victini, you can patch up that matchup quite easily. I think another thing to note is if there are going to be like Suicune style Melanie Aurora box decks, similar to how Zacian is an awkward matchup, that could also be awkward for this style of deck. But in general, possibly Brave Blade just gets over the line anyway in other V versus V matchups. So yeah, I think overall the matchup spread is annoyingly good for a deck as basic as this. You don't have to be doing not much to be buying yourself a lot of turns here. And that's what's quite scary, I think, overall. And that's really where we come to the closing thoughts, and I just think Zamazenta says no to a lot of decks, and I think that's going to be a problem. We have to respect that going forward into the post-rotation format. It's so simple to just promote a Zamazenta and buy free turns and do what you want. Even decks that are playing Path of the Peak and Phoebe, they need to be having a high enough damage cap to just clear off the Zamazenta all in one turn. And that's, you know, a caped Zamazenta is a lot of hit points to churn through. And if they're spending their resources attacking into the Zamazenta, there's more often than not a Zacian waiting in the back to slice into them with a Brave Blade as well. So they need to be able to chain high damage output at the same time whilst having these answers. Otherwise, you're just going to get sliced through by the Zacian in the end. So that's always a threatening prospect, I think, overall. So really the things that are going to stop this archetype being strong are essentially other Zacian variants. Trust no one, not even yourself, essentially. Where it could be the more aggro approaches keep this archetype at bay that little bit. If not that, possibly the Victini variants. Like I said, I'm skeptical that little bit about Victini because of the Inteleon engines that are creeping into all sorts of lists. But in general, if these sorts of archetypes are going to be, you know, on top, other Zacian variants, if they're that good in the format, it certainly gives people a reason to play Victini. So yeah, just keep an eye out for those things, how the meta develops. You can play those coating metals if you really feel like Victini is creeping up in play. But otherwise, I feel like this is a very simple, easy to play deck that, again, like I said, just says no to certain archetypes. And, you know, it's down to people to actually respect this deck and tech for it to actually stand a chance, because plenty of them won't. And like I said, even things like Ice Rider, where it makes sense for them to play Path of the Peak, and we have seen that in the past, it's not even going to phase this archetype. They can just go aggro Zacian and get through in a lot of instances. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Are you afraid of this sort of approach? We know how good Luke Metal has been in the past. Can we foresee a quad dog style deck do just as good? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And yeah, I'll be seeing you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.